This is a new cardigan. I'm actually going to just explain to you how I seam it up. This is not a comprehensive mattress stitch tutorial. It's just a very quick explanation for how I'm putting this together. I don't actually have a name for this yet as I'm filming this. I've just finished, I just cast it on last night and it's early on a Sunday morning and I wanted to seam it so I could block it. And it consists of 3 pieces which are joined in the middle of the back. So this is the top edge. So what I did was I took the back piece, which is this piece here, I folded it in half. That's where the half point is, but just to show you on a slightly smaller bit, I folded it in half like that, then I put a marker at the halfway point. That's all I did to determine the halfway point. You can probably put a marker as you're working it or camp rows or anything like that, but I just did it very roughly like that. So that's the halfway point. So I took the 2 front pieces meet in the middle of the back. So I took the front piece, the first front piece, and I pinned it here. I had the 2 right sides facing, so if I lay this out you can see my seam here. So I took the front piece and I pinned it in the middle of the back. So the end of the first front piece meets, that's the middle of the back. I pinned this here and then I had the right sides facing and then I started seaming from that direction and I went towards that marker. So that's how I seamed the first front. So I'll show you quickly on the second front how I'm doing it. So I've taken the second front and I've just pinned it into that same pin. So that pin, I put that pin in when I folded the 2 back pieces. So this is, if I just show you, it's one of these like 1, 2. I got this one at Loop in London. I don't know whether they sell it anymore. I think it's a company called Susan Bates, but I'm not quite sure. But any kind of padlock, stitch marker, or anything like that, anything that you can just sort of secure it with, it's fine. You only need one. So I put that in the middle and then I got the end of the front piece, the top edge of it, and I secured it like that. And then I want to make sure I got the right side facing me. Now I actually put markers in for every repeat to make it easier to count. So every time I finish a repeat I put a marker in. So I know that the side where these markers are on is the right side. Because this is garter stitch, it doesn't really matter if you flip it and end up with the wrong side as the right side. I don't think that makes a huge difference to this stitch pattern. So this is what I did. So it's pinned there, so that's where I want to end up sewing. But I'm going to start at this end. So I don't tend to use the tail to start sewing up with. I always like to use a new piece. So I'm going to do mattress stitch, and this is not an in-depth tutorial on mattress stitch. I do have a finishing techniques course where you can learn that, both online and in shops. But this is just, normally if I was going to seam garter stitch, which this is, I would normally just go into these kind of loops at the edge, like bumps at the edge. I can't see, there we go, like that. And then I'll do the same on the other side. But because this is quite thin yarn, I decided I wanted to do something that was a little bit closer to like proper mattress stitch. But it's difficult because it's garter stitch, it's a bit more difficult to see the rows. So what I'm going to do is, I've got these bumps on the edge of the fabric here. Can you see that? So what I did was I went in, stretched it out a bit. It probably is easier if you block it first, but I decided it was easier to get the fronts and the back the same size if I seam it first and then block it. So what I've basically done is I've gone into the fabric, I've gone under 2 of those bumps. That's 1, that's 2. 1 stitch in from the edge, so 2 pole bumps, 1 stitch in from the edge. So that's actually 4 rows. Which if it was a thicker yarn, I'd probably do less than that. But because this is quite a thin yarn, it's a 4-ply, but it's quite, because it's a single ply, feels thinner than that really. Then I'm going to do the same thing here. So I'm going to go about 1 stitch in from the edge. Then that's 1 bump, that's 2 bumps. Don't know how easy it is to see that, but and then I'm going to go back to the first edge into the hole I went through last, and then that's 1 bump, purl bump, and that's the second one. So you can see I'm going quite close to the edge. I'm doing sort of 1 stitch in from the edge, so I don't get a really thick seam because I don't want that. Then I'm going back to the second side, back into a hole I came out of, which is easy here because the yarn I'm sewing up with is green and I'm on a blue bit here. I am sewing up with the same yarn, but it's like that bit of the colour. So in here, under one bump, 2 bumps. And then you can see I'm not pulling it completely tight. Then I go back into the hole here, under 1 bump, under 2 bumps. And then back to the first side, into the hole I came out of last time, so where my green yarn is, go into that same hole, 1 bump, 2 bumps. I'm just going to do a few quickly so I can show you how I tighten it up. Now if you want to know more about mattress stitch, how to do mattress stitch on stocking stitch, reverse stocking stitch, which is on the purl side, and how I normally sew up garter stitch, but I made a different decision on this project, and loads more. You can look at my finishing course. I teach it in yarn shops, and I also teach it online. So if you're not local to me, you might want to look at the online one. Hang on. There we go. Okay, so I've done about that much now. So now I'm going to tighten it up. So if I grab my tail here, hold on to it, and then I just pull the two in opposite directions. Now with this yarn, because it's just a single ply, singles yarn, it will break quite easily. So if you pull it really hard, it might break. So just pull gently. Make sure you don't pull it too tight, and then I just tend to pull it back a bit. The thing is with this, I've got to make sure the seam is slightly stretchy, so when I block it, it will stretch a little bit. And I'll just do a little bit more and show you. There we go. There we go. Okay, like that. And then when I tighten it this time, normally I do like 1 inch or so. So when I tighten it up now, I hold it where I finished tightening it last time, so you can see that's where I start having these strands again. So if I just pinch it there and then pull it tight, and then I just make sure I can pull it that way again. So if I show you the other seam which I finished, because I haven't blocked this yet, I'm going to block it. So you can see the fabric has a lot of stretch in it. Now the seam won't have quite as much stretch in it, but I want to make sure it's got some stretch in it, so there's not inhibiting blocking of this. So once I've finished seaming and I get to there, to this point, so the fronts meet at the center back, I'm then going to do the same. I'm then going to do the sides. So I will then just take the sides, this is the side, and then I'll seam up here doing the same way. Look at the pattern. I haven't actually decided as I'm doing it exactly how long the side seam will be, so look at the pattern. What I will do is I'll put a marker. You can use these kind of markers, or you can use these clip things. I'll put a marker where I want the seam, so I'll measure it first, put a marker where I want the seam to end, and then I'll seam it. Okay. So I hope that was helpful. If you want to know more about seaming and finishing techniques generally, check out my online finishing course, or look out for when I'm teaching it in a yarn shop if you live in southwest of England, or other southern, sort of Birmingham South is where I mainly teach. If you have a yarn shop near you where you would like me to teach, then tell them about me and ask them to contact me. So now I've sewn this garment together, I'm going to block it. You can block it before you sew together, but I decided to sew together first. So I've soaked it in lukewarm water with a dash of wool wash, and then soaked it for about 10 minutes. Because the colour I used is quite a rich colour, there was a little bit of colour lost in the water, but that's fine. Doesn't mean it's going to come off on my clothes, or that there's something wrong with the yarn. It just happens when the colours are really bright. So I rolled it up in a towel just to drain out some of the excess water. So I'm going to take it out. Now the reason I decided to sew it up before, I block it, is because it'll be easier to make the pieces the right width and length. The two front pieces are exactly half the size of the back piece. So it's got a back piece and two front pieces, and the two front pieces are half the width of the back piece. So it was just a lot easier to make sure each piece is the right size to sew it up first. But the problem with sewing it up first is that I'm blocking like a double layer of fabric. So it will take a little bit longer to dry. But it also takes up less space than blocking each piece separately. So you have to do what you feel best. You can definitely block it first and then sew it up later. It'll dry quicker because you only have half the layer of fabric. You could also sew up the seam along the top of the shoulder and the sleeves and not the side seam. So you can block it and then just do the side seam afterwards. It's up to you. Doesn't really matter one way or the other. I just did it because this will be, for me, I feel this is easier. But absolutely do what you feel is best. So I'm going to flick the camera around so you can see what I'm doing and then explain what I'm doing as we go. Okay, so to block this, I'm going to use blocking wires and pins, and I may also use some of my knit blockers. So first thing I'm going to do, so the knit blockers are, if you haven't seen them, they're these things. I use them a lot in my blocking videos. They're like a white, like a plastic thing with combs coming up from it. That's what the box looks like. I really like them. They're really useful, especially for times when I can't use straight wires. I probably mainly use wires for this, but I thought I'd have the knit blockers ready just in case. So what I've done is I've laid the garment down with the back at the bottom, and then I'm just kind of straightening it out, just straightening out the shoulder seams. I'm going to need, this is going to be quite long, so I'm going to need some more blocking mats put in. And then they meet the two fronts. Actually, there is no kind of like back neck, if you like. This will kind of drop down the back a little bit to kind of form the neck shaping. So the two front pieces are actually joined at the back neck in the center. Let me just pull this one a bit so you can see. So that's the center back, and that's where the two fronts are joined. So you can see that. I know that's a bit weird, but this actually sort of drops down the top of the back a little bit to create a sort of very relaxed shrug type cardigan. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is get one of my blocking wires. These are just the Knit Pro blocking wires, and I'm going to go through, I'm going to just take them down a little bit so you can see better what I'm doing. I'm just going to go inside the seam. So because I've got a seam here, I'm not actually going to go in and out of the fabric. I'm just going to take it inside the fabric and then kind of line it up with the seam like that. And then I'm going to try and line up the wire with the seam and pull it right up against the edge of my blocking mat. I'm also going to just change this camera slightly so you can see a little bit better what I'm doing. There we go. So I think I'll use these for this. You can use just the blocking pins for this if you prefer. So I'm just going to line it up with a corner here. It's easier to make sure that this upper edge is sort of straight if I line it up with my blocking mat. Then I'm just going to stretch it as much as I can. Now you've got to think about the fact that if you stretch it more this way, you'll be able to stretch it less that way. So you've got to kind of bear that in mind when you stretch it. So I'm going to just stretch it for about there. And then I'm going to take, I'm just going to put one of these in here now. I may actually put, I'm just making sure that the seam is right at the top, you know, so the blocking wire is actually lined up with the seam and not, so the seam doesn't like slip underneath. And I'm just going to put that one in. I'm going to put more in here later, but I just want to make sure I can get the length I want. So I'm going to take another blocking wire. Now I've sewn up the side seam. I may have to sew it up a bit more. I haven't decided how big I want the arm opening to be yet, because I want to try it on and see what it fits like. I've never actually done a garment exactly this shape or construction before, so it's a little bit of an experiment. So what I'm going to do is I've just taken that inside that seam, and then I think I'm going to use my knit blockers to stretch the armhole out. We'll grab a couple of these, and then I'm just going to stretch this down again. I want to line it up with the edge of the blocking mat and stretch it down as far as I can. There we go. And then I'll also put one in here. Then I will put, actually I'll put another one in the middle there at the moment. And again, I just want to make sure that the seam is not allowed to kind of like, the seam lines up exactly with the wire, so the seam isn't allowed to kind of like slip underneath the, so that's kind of what it wants to do. Okay, and then I'm going to take some of these bigger ones, and I'm going to make sure I grab the top and the bottom fabric and just stretch it out. Like that. Okay, so when I get to here where the wire is, it's actually a little bit, it was bunching up a bit, so I'm actually going to stretch this down a little bit more. So I'll take that out, stretch that down as far as I can, and then put a couple more of these lip blockers in there. So that's the full length of the fabric. I'm just going to get my tape measure out and measure how long that is. That is 73 centimeters, so that's fine. I'm happy with that. So I'm going to put, if that was too short, if this length was too short, then I would relax this top edge a bit so I could stretch it longer that way. But because I'm happy with that length, I'm going to put in the nip blockers at the top here, because I don't need to adjust this anymore. And then I'm going to put a wire in at the bottom and down the middle. So we'll do the bottom first. So now I've got to remember, I've got to go through the front, the top and bottom fabric at the same time. Now I can just use the nip blockers for this, but I don't think I'm going to have enough to go along the whole of the lower edge. So I'm just going to do it like this. If I need to really get another pack of nip blockers. So I'm just going through like a stitch or two in from the edge, I guess. It is quite useful if you've got yarn-overs along the edge, because then, or like yarn over a couple of stitches in from the edge, because then you can just go in and out of the yarn-overs, but I don't have that here. So I'm just kind of doing this roughly, because the kind of relaxed shape of this cardigan, it doesn't matter if it's not like 100% accurate. But I want to make sure when I get to here, I'm roughly in the center. I should probably, before I started this, if I started blocking it, I could have folded the bottom piece, which is the back, over and marked the center, so it lines up with the center of the top here. But I didn't do that, and because I've started pinning it out now, I'm not going to take it out and do that. So we'll just do this, kind of eyeball it. Okay, so that's, just needed one wire for that, so that's good. So then I'm going to take, I might just use the pins at the bottom here, because I just want to make sure I'm not running out of the nip blockers. So I'm just going to roughly line it up. So I'm actually going to, on the blocking mat, you got this little sort of like jigsaw thing, so I'm going to just give one, so it's just past the second one, which means it's going to be about here. It's going to come up line with this one. So I've just put a pin there, and then we want to, I'm also using this one, so at the edge of the fabric over here, I'm like just above the first of these. So I'm just going to, that's going to be about here, but it's going to line up with that. So I'll just pull this over and pin it. So this is stretching is quite a lot. You can see this is curved quite a lot, so I'm just going to pull that out and pin it. I do want this block quite aggressively because it's wool, so it will shrink back a little bit. So if I block it quite aggressively, it'll keep its shape better. So if you're thinking when you're blocking yours that, you know, you're stretching it an awful lot, that's fine. Okay, so let's just the camera a little bit. So now I'm going to, before I do the second half, I'm actually going to stretch this bit and line this up. I think before, actually no, I think I will stretch out the second bit first. So I've used 2 blocking wires, so I will keep 2 blocking wires out, and then I actually got 2 extra ones out because I wasn't sure how many I was going to use. All my blocking wires are a bit bent, so I'm going to put 2 of them away. And then I'm going to get some more blocking mats. I'm going to just slide this over a bit. Before I do that, let's just measure. So I'm just going to measure along this top edge. So 65 centimetres. I'm just going to slide this over and put some more blocking mats in here. So let's just, there we go. Sometimes I try and line things up with like the edge of the blocking mats, to say it would take like the width of 3 blocking mats. I then wouldn't necessarily measure it while I'm blocking because I just line it up with the blocking mat. But this one's about 2.5 actually, so it should take me right to the edge here. So now I'm going to put the next blocking wire in underneath here. Now you could just stretch out the whole top edge before you did the sides, but I decided it was easier to do half and then do the other half. But you can certainly go all the way along the top. The thing is, I don't know the final measurements yet because, you know, this is the first time I've knitted this. This is the original sample. This is the first time I'm blocking it. So I have no idea how this is gonna, what size this is gonna block out to. So I need to know that. Whereas when you are making this pattern, you can just look at the measurements and then stretch it out to that size. And if you've knitted it the correct tension, that should be fine. If your tension is a bit tighter, then you won't have problems stretching it out as much as I've said. But I don't know the measurements yet because I'm making that up as I go along. Well, not quite, but I did do like a rough tension before I wrote the pattern, so I know it'd end up like roughly the size I wanted it. But because it's not like a fitted garment, I didn't do the tension that carefully before I started knitting, like I normally do. So that's why I decided to block out half of it, so that I know that I'd stretched it enough this way, so I can stretch it how much I wanted that way, if that makes sense. Or am I just rambling? I don't know. So now I'm just going along the top here and making sure the seam is lined up with my wire, and I've stretched it right to the edge of the fabric. So I use 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So the middle of the garment is halfway through the third. I went over 2.5 blocking mats, so then that takes me to the edge on the rest 2.5. So that's quite easy to. Okay, so I actually thought I needed 2 of these blocking wires, but I actually need 3. So I'm now going to put this down the edge of the garment. Okay, like that. And then I'm going to just grab another blocking wire. And I think before I actually stretch this out, I'm just going to go through the bottom part of the blocking, bottom part of the garment. And on the other side I stretched this out first, but I think it's actually going to be easier. Because this other half is stretched quite a lot, it's kind of pulling this out of shape a little bit. So before I stretch this bit, I'm actually just going to put the wires in along the bottom as well. So I make sure that the wire that goes along the side of the garment is lined up with the wire that goes along the side. And then I'm just going to put this wire in along the bottom. So the direction of knitting was this way. So the cast on, it was going to knit in that direction. Or it might have been the other way, I can't remember. But that's the direction of knitting. So it's knitted sideways in garter stitch. The reason I decided to do it sideways is because it's got stripes. So then I thought the stripes would be vertical rather than horizontal. I've used Sabbable 100, Shopple Sabbable 100. If you want the stripes to be slightly less obvious, you can use Sabba Flower, which is the same yarn, but it's it's a bigger ball. So it's 150 gram, 600 meter ball instead of 100 gram ball, and the color repeats are longer. So if you wanted it so that the color stripes were not as, it wasn't as stripy, then you can go for that. Okay, so I realized that I'm not going to get quite to the middle there. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to take out some of the pins I put in the bottom on the first half, which you can actually, let me just. So the first half that I stretched it, I've just taken some of the pins out to just relax that a bit. And then I'm just going to actually check to make sure that it lines up roughly with the colour repeats. So that's actually where I want to be. So I'm actually going to just put one of these pins in here to keep that together because it wasn't lining up quite right. I think I have to actually redo the other side as well. So I'm just going to put the wire in at the bottom here again. Right, I'm slightly out of camera now, I think, but I'm just redoing what I just did, so I'm not going to worry too much about that. I'll be back in camera in a second. Okay, so I'm just putting the wire back in again. So it probably is a good idea to mark the center at the bottom here, and even just clip the edges of the front to the center of the back before you start pinning out before you start pinning it out, because I wasn't quite careful enough with the first half to make sure that my bottom piece reached the center. I mean, I'm not going to seam it or anything, so I mean it's just going to kind of flap open when I finished anyway, but so it's not the end of the world. But I think that's roughly the center. I don't know, that one should be really a little bit more over. So I might actually redo the wire over here, but we'll. So now I'm going to stretch this out, and I'm also going to make sure I stretch it long enough. So this, at this point, because it's quite easy to stretch out the first half, but now it's becoming a little bit more difficult because I'm stretching the garment kind of to its limits, really. So let me just grab some knit blockers for this. We're going to do the side seam first. So I'm just going to find the actual seam. There we go. And then I'm going to go down to about there. So ideally you want to measure that to make sure it's spot on, but I'm going to just eyeball it for now, then I'll measure it later. And now I want to grab the bottom piece of the bottom layer of fabric and just pull it out to the side, and then stretch out, block out the armhole. if you find this difficult to block it out to the actual measurements, you could stretch it out but not like pin it out but not stretch it quite as much to start with, and then once you've got everything into the right shape, you can just then go through it again and stretch it more. You don't have to stretch it to the actual measurements you need straight away. If you find it difficult, because it does get a little bit difficult towards the end, because you know the fabric is stretched to like its limits really. So what I sometimes do is I'll just get it to the rough correct shape and then I will stretch it more. That's one thing I do quite a lot. Just going to take that one, swap that one for a small one. So then let's have a look at the bottom part of the fabric again and see if we can stretch this out. And this is where sometimes I have to relax it, release it a little bit to get it to stretch out to the like full shape. So I've stretched out the first half, but I haven't stretched out the other half. So now once I'm starting to stretch this, if I find that once I'm stretching this, it's starting to lift here, for example, I may have to just kind of relax it a little bit. What I did was I just kind of let it shrink a little bit up the side here. Okay. Also notice that the lower part of the fabric here has, this looks a bit funny, something funny is happening here. So notice here I haven't actually lined it up. The seam has actually like slipped under, so I'm going to have to redo this. Okay, so I had to stop filming for a second because my husband arrived home, and I had to allow him time to get in the house and dog to calm down and things. So while we were doing that, I actually re-threaded the whole bottom edge because it wasn't, when I got to where I'd finished threading the first bit, it wasn't lining up with the top bit. It was kind of a little bit, it should be here, but it was a little bit more over here. So I took out the pin and the wire, I pulled the top piece so it lined up roughly down here, and then I just started threading it from there, went that way, and then I did the same for that bit. So it's roughly lining up in the middle. And now what I need to do is I need to stretch these bits so they meet roughly in the middle. I could do the wire through the top and bottom layer of the fabric. I think I'm actually going to see how, I'm not quite sure. I think I'll try the wire first. So I want to pull this over, so I'm going to actually take the two pins out of the top here just so I can, and I want to, I don't know. Now I'm actually not going to do the wire because I don't want these bits to overlap. I want them to kind of meet but not overlap. So I think I'm going to, let's do it with the wire. I was thinking about threading the wire through both of them, but what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go, first I was going to do for my knit blockers, but it is actually easier to get a completely straight edge if you use the wires. And then I was thinking I will kind of overlap them slightly, but I don't really want them to overlap. So I will do a wire on each of them. So that means I will have used 3, 6, 7, 8 wires. Doing something like this with straight edges is certainly a lot easier if you have blocking wires or if you have the knit blockers, but you need quite a lot of knit blockers because like this bit here, you need to put the knit blockers like right next to each other like that, so they just go like right next to each other. There can't be any gaps because this is stretched so much that if you have gaps you just end up with this sort of like sort of scalloped fabric. You can use pins, but again you'd have to, because this is stretched so much, you'd need a lot of pins in order to get straight edges. So if you don't have blocking wires, it might be worth considering investing or borrowing a pair. Ask maybe your local yarn shop, do like a loan service. I think if I had a local yarn shop, if I owned a yarn shop, that would be something I would be consider doing. It's like a blocking wire loan or rental service, like pay a deposit or something and get the deposit back when you bring them back or something like that, because it's not something that everyone wants to invest in or can afford to invest in, but it is something that's really, really useful. Okay, so that's, I'm going to use these now. You can use pins for this. So I'm just going to stretch it and then put these straight down the middle. It's certainly, I think, a lot easier to stretch it and get a straight line using a wire. So I was right in deciding to choose a wire. So let's do the second bit. Just taking this top nip locker out just so I can thread the wire through. I don't want to leave the gaps, so I'm going in and out of the fabric, just threading it through the edge of the fabric, probably about 1 row in. I don't think I'm being like 100% accurate all the way through, but you want to kind of get as close to the fabric at the edge of the fabric as you can, but you don't want to be right on the edge of the fabric. So probably about 1 row in. Because remember, this is knitted in that direction. Well, it's knitted sideways. Right, there we go. And you don't want to, probably doing a couple of 2 to 3 stitches. So I go over 2 to 3 stitches, under 2 to 3 stitches, and then over. It would be a lot easier if I had done like a yarn over edging at the edge of the fabric, so that I could just go in and out of the yarn overs. It makes blocking, threading blocking wise a lot easier, but I didn't want to do that on this garment. So we're nearly there now. So now I've threaded all the way through, so then I want to pull it so that it meets the other half, and then put these blockers in again. Okay. So I was kind of 1 knit blocker. I just had enough knit blockers. I'm just going to spread these out a little bit because I'm kind of 1 knit blocker short. There we go. Okay, so that's it. So just a very quick repetition in how this seams together. So I know you can't see the completely full square, but you can see most of it. Push it a little bit closer, there we go. So the back piece is the full length of the garment, and it's knitted sideways. So, and then the front pieces are the half the width of the back. So they are the shoulder and top sleeve seam starts at the middle. So what I did was I took the front piece, I folded the back piece in half, and then I put one of these pin things. It's just got like 1 tooth in it. I don't know where you can get those from in the UK. I don't know what make this is. I've got a feeling it's something like Susan Bates, something like that. But I've had them for a long time, probably like 10 years, so I don't know. But if you see anything like this, they're really useful. You can also use the padlock markers, removable stitch markers as well. So I folded the back piece in half, and then I just put one of these in, and then I got the front piece and I clipped it to the center back, and then I started at the other end. So the clip was So the clip was on this end, I started from the other end and I seamed it towards the center. And then I did the same with the other front piece. I clipped it to the center here, center back, and then I seamed it from the outside in. And then I did the, let me just slide this over a little bit so you can see. So I did the bottom down there. Hang on, let me get up. So for the side seams, they're seamed a little bit over halfway. I may adjust that once I get final measurements and I try it on, but I started at the bottom and I just seamed it along this seam till I got to where I thought it would be okay. Then I did the same on the other side. Now, because I haven't tried this on yet, obviously because I haven't blocked it, I've just blocked it. So once it's dried, I want to try it on, then I make some adjustments to the side seam. But you just need to follow the measurements in the garment and the schematic, then you'll be fine. Obviously you can adjust it if you want to. So if you want a slightly smaller armhole or slightly bigger armhole, you can adjust that. And then I just blocked it, stretched it out, and blocked it to a rectangle basically. So I hope that was helpful. I will add a little video to the end of this when it's finished drying and it dries up outside because it's raining at the moment. I'll try and add a little video clip to the end of this, or some photos at least of how it actually fits on, so you can see how it fits on. But if you have any questions, please just ask below this video.